Welcome to the Raw Food Health Empowerment Podcast, where we delve into the powerful benefits of a holistic, high raw vegan lifestyle for achieving optimal health, brain function, and overall well being. I'm your host, Samantha Salmon, and today we're going to be talking about changes. Like, how do changes happen? Some of you, I think this episode is going to help yourself give yourself like a little bit of grace and also a different frame of mind when dealing with family members, because I know that's a big issue in the community, right? A lot of people want to see their family members healthier. The biggest thing I would say around that is you need to lead that charge, right? So that is what I call stepping up into healthy leadership, you being the model and not necessarily telling other people what to do, because nobody wants to be told what to do. But if you step up into healthy leadership and become the model, then folks get inspired by that. Like I talked about last episode on, or one of the previous episodes, about how I channel China when I'm doing my upper body strength training workouts. Like China, I never had a conversation with China. She never was like, oh, you need to get arms like me. But I was inspired to do it because of the evidence, because of things I've witnessed in my life, past traumas, and where I feel like being strong is really important for me. I have my own internal value system of why that's important for me. And then I'm doing the thing, I'm taking action. And even in that, it's hard. So China is a model for strength, for me to pull strength. So just understand, as you are wanting other people in your family to do this thing, you don't really have to push them, because pushing doesn't work. When people try to force you to believe a thing or to think a thing, usually it doesn't work for most people. And because, like I said, nobody wants to be told what to do. The best way to go about it is to be the model yourself. Go through the journey yourself. And actually, going through that journey is going to help you build some empathy for other people, because you're going to experience some challenges. You're going to experience some negative chatter in your mind. You're going to go through all the things that hold other people back, but you're so motivated and inspired that you're going to push through anyway. And that right there is the gold. Once you made it on the other side and you've journaled everything, you've documented everything, you now have a script, a template, a framework of what's worked for you and what could potentially work for a group of other people. Not necessarily everybody, but a group of people. And so that's really valuable information. But ultimately, people don't change when they see the light, only when they feel the heat, right? This is even me. This is it. This is just, it's human nature, it's human behavior, right? We have an obesity crisis, we have a mental health crisis. Scientists are in agreement that processed food and refined sugar is a problem. And the initiatives to try to get that out of schools has always been shut down by folks. Don't tell us how to feed our kids. They're not going to necessarily make a change until they're witnessing their family members have to get amputated or getting diagnosed with these illnesses. It's like, folks, you may be, for example, lukewarm on the gun situation. Should people have guns? Should they not have guns? If you witness a shooting, you were part of a shooting, or someone you know got shot or whatever, now you're more closely related to it. You're more in the heat. And so you have a different opinion now. Like, you actually probably have an opinion, whereas before you were probably ambivalent. So it's just human nature, it's human behavior, right? So how people change, high motivation and the ability to do it. It needs to, folks get motivation from having a quick, easy first win. So this goes for you, right? So you're starting this journey, and first we're going to focus on you, but also all of this is still relevant for family members. If you have kids that you're trying to help get onto the healthy eating pattern as well, make it quick wins. So typically, like I know with the store, Earth Healing Cafe, we had a green smoothie called Liquid Sunlight, and it had spinach and kale. It had a base of fresh pressed apples and mango, and I forget what else was in there. I think there was a fifth ingredient. But in any case, it was green, but the fruits masked the flavor of the green stuff, of the chlorophyll. So it had the color of the green vegetables, but the flavor of the fruits, right? And the kids loved it. All the young kids loved it. So this is something that you can do. Basically, find all the foods that they like. Fruits, vegetables, what's the list? And then try recipes, right? Try recipes, start with one, then move into two, and slowly introduce maybe a new recipe a week, right? So you get those quick wins, their palate starts to get more into natural, whole, healthy foods, their gut microbiome is changing, and it's a win for everybody, right? So you're going to pick the one thing. And maybe for the kids, it's nutrition. Maybe for you, it's exercise, right? So how can you make exercise easy for yourself to get started right now if you're not doing anything, right? Because if motivation is high, you can do hard things. If motivation is low, do one easy thing at a time. So for example, if you're trying to drink more water, right? How can you make it easy for yourself, right? Or fun to gamify it. So like I have my water bottle that I call a coaching water bottle because it literally has like at the timestamps and some motivational messages on the bottle. And when I got it, it became like a game for me. Oh, okay. At 2 o'clock, I should be at this level. At 3 o'clock, I should be at this level. So I'm trying to meet the metrics of the bottle, right? So I gamified it. So it became fun because you have to start from somewhere, right? So use baby steps. You may have heard it as tiny habits by BJ Fogg, right? Just to make the big changes, because all big changes start with taking one step. You start today with the one step, and that gives you the motivation to keep going forward. And as you're going, reflect on those quick wins, on those wins, right? To boost your sense of accomplishment and confidence, you know? Now, I know some of you probably have an inner child in your mind that sabotages your plans with automatic negative thoughts or excuses, right? So this is where doing more, I like to coach on having realistic thinking. But just know that there are actually brain scans that show that you have a fuller, nicer brain in terms of like blood flow to the brain when you are grateful versus when you're fearful. When you're fearful, blood flow gets dropped in the prefrontal cortex, in the anterior cingulate, in the temporal lobes, right? Globally. So grateful. So we know just by the experience or practice of gratitude, we are having a physical experience in the body, in the brain, right? That's affecting the functioning of our brain. So where do you focus your attention? If you're trying to create change and it's a big thing for you, let's say you have a lot of weight, excess fat that you're trying to lose, or you have a chronic disease diagnosis you're trying to reverse. So you're making these healthy changes. Instead of focusing on all the things you haven't yet accomplished, focus on the wins that you have accomplished and be grateful for those things. Or what are some other things that you could be grateful for in this moment? And focus on the one step at a time. Celebrate those wins and journal everything. Journal your wins so you can be reminded that it's not all gloom and doom. And when things don't work out as you had planned in certain areas, maybe there was a slip up or a hiccup here and there, write those down because those are not failures. Those are learning lessons, right? So you write it down. What happened before? How can you course correct going forward? Make sure when you're out and about and shopping, you read food labels. Better yet, buy things where you don't even have to read food labels. Because if there's a food label, you're already in trouble right there. Because even with some healthy food, if it has a label, they have put together a concoction that is really exciting to the palate. And there's a lot of discourse around it, which I highly agree as somebody who identifies as an overeater. I have always said, I am a glutton, which is one of the deadly sins, right? And the only reason we have gotten to gluttony in our society is because of hyper palatable food. If you bump up the salt, you bump up the sugar, even if healthy, you bump up the fat to these levels where you just haven't hit. Because at a certain point, which food scientists have figured out, there's a point of diminishing returns where it's like nasty, right? But you want to get right under that where it's so pleasurable. You're basically getting a dopamine, which is our feel good hormone, dopamine downpour. And it's so pleasurable. Now you're engaging the addiction centers of the brain, and you just want more to recreate that experience, that dopamine rush, right? And you get into this even with healthy foods where they have a label, right? Because it's a business, right? It's capitalism. Folks want to package things, have their own recipe for things so that they can productize it and make sales. And I'm not against business. However, if you are an overeater and you have excess fat to lose, you have chronic disease to reverse, you have to understand how the game is being played so you don't become a victim, right? These companies exist for their own gain. They have something they're trying to achieve. You have something you're trying to achieve, which is your health and healing. And that's what I'm here speaking to, right? I'm here for you to get into your healthiest self, your healthiest body, which means you have to understand how the game is played so you don't become a victim, which means that if you are looking at a label, put it down, right? Because now you are engaging the addiction centers of the brain, the addiction pathways, and it makes you more susceptible to falling into unhealthy eating behavior, right? Because now you have this thing, it's a healthy thing, and you're like, ooh, it's so pleasurable, right? The sweet, the fat, whatever that you have in there, and then you want to eat more and more, right? And if they're healthy foods, what are the consequences of it? It may not be much, but what I can tell you from my personal experience is that when you fall into the trap of overeating, which is very easy to do in our society, you run the risk of diverging from whatever your goals are, right? If you're looking to release excess fat, even if you get down to your healthy weight range, you may notice yourself gaining weight because it's just overeating means you're over caloried in relation to the amount of energy you are putting out, right? And if you have a sedentary life, somewhat sedentary, right? Even if you're exercising for an hour a day, that's still considered somewhat sedentary. You have a sedentary job. You're not active in terms of your life, your daily life. You have this 1 hour a day where you're doing movement, intense movement, and you probably get up in the day maybe a few times, right? In the big scheme of things, that's still considered sedentary. So we're mostly sedentary, right? It's not like we're farmers. It's not like we are police officers or I don't even know who else working in the juice bar. When I owned a juice bar, that is not a sedentary job. Like there are no chairs. You don't sit. You're on your feet all the time. And you're active and you're moving around. If you work in like the folks that work at Trader Joe's, that is an active job. Fitness trainers, that's an active job, right? When you're in that situation, things are a little bit different. But if you're sedentary or if you're an athlete, for example, if you're an athlete, is it even possible to be overfed? If you're a marathon runner, probably not. For bodybuilders, depending on where they are in their training and for how far out they are from a show, then yeah, it's a possibility that they could be overfed. But this is why you want to like just stay away from food labels. But if you're picking up something with a food label, definitely make sure you read it to make sure it is meeting the values of what you are looking to consume, right? Because there is sugars like hidden in all sorts of ways and crazy stuff like you wouldn't even believe. Like, why is there sugar in here? And ultimately, the focus for your goal should always be on health. Okay, so now an important thing to mention too is that when you're dealing with children and other people in your family, we want to focus on health and not necessarily weight. And honestly, weight means not much, which is why I don't really talk about BMI. I try not to incorporate that even though the medical system uses that terminology and that metric. I try not to because it doesn't really tell us anything about metabolic health, which is ultimately the life or death of the body, is the health of your metabolism and the health of your cells. We really want to emphasize more health as opposed to weight. There's a lot of things that make up weight, some of which are really great for you. The thing that we're most concerned about that's detrimental to health and tracks with a shorter lifespan is excess fat. So we want to be more concerned about health. Our messaging needs to be around health and not so much weight, especially when we're talking with kids, because we don't really want people to have an eating disorder, some kind of really bad relationship with food. Food is wonderful. Things that are actually food is wonderful, is nourishing for the body, fruits, vegetables, nuts and seeds, right? A lot of the processed foods in the grocery store, in the literature, it's called ultra processed foods or processed foods, UPFs, PFs. To me, these things aren't food. You can't have stuff sitting out on a shelf for days and days and last for a year or plus and doesn't go bad and call that food. That's not organic. That's organic matter goes back. So we just want to, when we, especially talking to children, but even other people in our family members are in our family, the focus needs to be on evidence-based nutrition. In my opinion, the focus needs to be on health. And we're just sharing information. It's like whatever else you talk about with your family. I don't even know what you talk about. I don't know what families talk about. But if my mother-in-law comes back from church and she's sharing that the pastor or the priest read this portion of the Bible, which talks about blah, blah, blah. These are all facts, right? And there's nothing to be antagonistic about because she's literally stating facts, right? This happened. He said that. And yes, that's in the Bible. And the same way these conversations could be had with your family members. Don't eat XYZ because studies show that it's linked to cancer. I read it here. This is it if you'd like to read it. And conversation done, unless they still want to continue talking about it. It doesn't have to be antagonistic. You don't have to feel nervous about it because you're literally just sharing facts. If you feel uncomfortable sharing facts, I think it's worth exploring how much you actually believe it, number one. And number two, is there a bigger, deeper issue here? A lot of times, not when it comes to children, but adults in the family, where folks are feeling sometimes this contention, like the food is somehow politicized or whatever. What I've found is that there's something deeper there. If you were stepping up in your life in any way. Let's say you were doing things to build a business and there were never any entrepreneurs in your family before or something like this, or now you start to get into money and gain wealth and no one else in your family can relate to that, so they feel some type of way about that. Anytime you're doing any kind of personal development work, you're developing and other people feel like they're being left behind or they're not being self-actualized, there's almost this undercurrent of this energy of almost jealousy, and it ends up manifesting into this tension, right? So no, it's not necessarily about the food because it's evidence-based nutrition. It's just facts, right? It has nothing to do with the diet, okay? It's more about humans and their brains and their minds and the stories that they're telling themselves, right? Their own limiting beliefs, their own issues, dragons that they have to deal with, that they have to tame, the ants running through their mind, the automatic negative thoughts running through their mind that they have to quell and deal with, right? It's not your problem. So for the other adults, they're on their journey, they're on their health journey, they're on their own life journey, and you're on yours. And if you feel like sharing, that's how you share from a place of not being hyper emotional about it. And I'm speaking from personal experience because I had a trauma experience that led into this lifestyle change. And I just expected other people who witnessed what I witnessed with my grandmother. I just expected them to make the change because it's logical to me. To me, it just made so much sense. Why wouldn't you do it? And that the experience, just me responding in a way that wasn't really helpful for them making change because I'm responding from my trauma place. And of course, they respond from their hurt place as well. So it's two hurt people hurting people. And we're talking about food, but it's not about the food at all. You know, at the time I thought it was, but it's actually not. And so the way we actually help people heal is healing ourselves, handling our own wounds so we are not triggering others. We're not being triggered and we're not triggering others, right? And that takes time. It's a whole journey. And is it worth investing into another adult? I have to always preface this because the young kids are young kids. They don't have fully formed, fully developed brains yet. So this is the time for molding and educating and all this kinds of stuff and nurturing and loving. And I find healthy, clean eating to be the most loving thing you can do for a child, right? While their brain is developing, you don't want to halt the brain development. You want them to become the best version of themselves. And you can't do that with an unhealthy brain. But when you're dealing with another adult, sometimes it's just enough for them to deal with their thing on their own. So you could just focus on you and deal with your thing. Because sometimes we're dealing with so many things, so many dragons that, and the negative thoughts that it's just enough for us to carry in this lifetime. Our own shit, just to deal with our own shit, to then take on other people's stuff. It just was too much. It's really too much. So don't wear that badge on you. Even me as a professional is something I had to learn because even though I do this professionally, I had to learn how to have some psychological distance from my clients' issues, right? I couldn't absorb that and take that on because in the beginning of my coaching days, it was physically making me unwell and hindered my performance as a coach, right? But that's something you learn on the journey, right? That's part of self-development. That's part of growth. That's part of experience. Who knew that would happen, right? If you have some great coaches and instructors behind you, mentors, then they'll probably let you know that beforehand. If any of you are looking to get into coaching, that's something to know. Okay, you're welcome. You need to practice having psychological distance from other people's issues and sometimes from your own thoughts, negative thoughts, really like the ones that keep coming out that aren't helpful. And you do some reflection on these thoughts, and you know what? It's actually not true. It's not true. So you got to have some psychological distance from that, kind of step outside yourself and really observe what's going on in your own mind. Is it useful? Is it helpful? Is it true? This is the journey. This is the journey of change. When we're becoming really self-actualized, we're stepping up into our highest self. Okay, when it comes to nourishment, healthy, clean nourishment, what does that look like? You want clean protein. So we're eating our species specific diet. So all the proteins in there, and don't sleep on the greens because the greens have the highest level of protein per energy, per calorie, right? So you're getting the biggest bang for your buck when it comes to greens and protein. And for me, that has been critical in me releasing excess fat and building muscle. Of course, you have the healthy fats with a primary focus on omega-3 fatty acids, which we should be consuming every day for a healthy brain. Fiber is the focus of our diet, right? This is what we are doing with plant foods. All plant foods have fiber. Meat, dairy, eggs do not have fiber. All right. And part of having a healthy brain is having a healthy gut, probiotics, prebiotics, varying your nutrient sources. So rotating your vegetables and your fruits, all of that is important. Vitamin D is important, making sure you get that healthy sun, exercising, all of these things make a difference. So some tips on the nutrient piece. Instead of sandwiches, have salads with clean protein. It's going to give you satiety. It's going to give you bulk and satisfaction. It's going to give you texture. Make the salad the main meal. Instead of rice, use vegetables, right? Instead of bread, use leafy greens. Or they even have like coconut wraps or some of these raw vegan wraps. But I think the healthiest, most affordable, most accessible thing are leafy greens, collard leaves, lettuce, kale, those things you could use as wraps. On my blog, you'll see there's a recipe called kielbasa, which is a sausage recipe. And in the image, I used Swiss chard as the bun. But you can also use kale. You can also use any kind of leafy green. And when it comes to healthy treats like desserts, I like to spend as little time as possible because I'm lazy and I just want things quick. And so I tend to just grab raisins and sprouted almonds and pull the two together and put it in my mouth. And that is a nice dessert for me, to be honest. I've also been loving like golden milk with almond milk as the base has been great. It has turmeric and some date sugar in there with ashwagandha and some other stuff. It's a really nice drink that kind of just calms me down for the day. So while you're on this journey of change, be curious and not furious, right? Think about what's in the food. Think about how the food is making you feel. Journal all of that. Think about, even I would want to encourage people to think about where that food came from and the people that made it possible for that food to make it to your plate. That's part of mindful eating. It didn't just appear out of nowhere. A seed was planted, it was harvested by someone. That someone has a family, and a whole bunch of people touched that food before it got to you. So something to think about. So all of this information and nutritional goodies all factor into having a healthy brain, having a healthy body and a healthy brain. And I have even more goodies for you in my upcoming webinar called Unlock Your Brain's Potential, Foundational Principles, and Practical Strategies for Cognitive Performance. I highly recommend that you register and learn more about the principles for optimizing brain function. I can't wait to see you there. And until then, take care.